Good evening to all. I'm Stefanos Polizoidis, Dean of the School of Architecture at the University of Notre Dame. And it's my great pleasure to introduce to you tonight Marieanne Khoury Vogt. Marieanne is founding principal of Khoury and Vogt Architects, and the firm was formed in 2001 Miami as a practice in architecture, urban design, and town planning. She started her architectural studies at l'École Spéciale d'Architecture in Paris and received a B.Arch and a Master's of Architecture in Urban Planning from the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee. Khoury Vogt is currently based in Alice Beach, Florida, and their work is grounded in the typological traditions of the tropical Southeast. It is deeply urban as it explores the issues of architectural character that attempt a synthesis between modern and vernacular styles. Their projects feel fresh and new while projecting a sense of comfort and delight, which is a very unusual combination, as you know. Often the fresh and the new in our times are neither comfortable or delightful. It is a great pleasure to be welcoming Marieanne to Notre Dame today, and I'm looking forward to her lecture and to your comments and questions following. Welcome, Marieanne.
Thank you, Stefanos. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to have been asked to present on behalf of Khoury Vogt Architects. My husband, Eric, is a co-town architect with me and co-founder, and we are an office of 13, located just outside of Alice Beach in Florida. So we decided that we're going to focus mostly on our work in Alice Beach, with one exception, kind of starting with a project in Miami, which kind of launched our practice. So the title of this lecture is called Style and Substance, Designing a New Urbanist Town in the 21st Century. But I did think that I wanted to start with when we got founded. So we decided to open our practice August 1, 2001, so a month before September 11th in Miami, Florida. And we actually got our start in Vincent Scully's living room, where we were house sitting his house in Coral Gables. And so that is where kind of we started our office. And then we quickly moved into our first house, which was an arts and craft bungalow in the historic neighborhood of Buena Vista in Miami. And this is us 20 years ago. So obviously we have aged, but this is us in front of our arts and craft bungalow. And we had our first daughter there and our first office was there. So it's a kind of an emotional touch point for us. Our very first project in Miami, I should say our very first kind of urban project in Miami, I decided to show this one because it's interesting from many points of view, and it became a kind of a precursor of the work that Eric and I would find ourselves doing. So this project was done in collaboration with Carrie Penabad and Adib Khoury for Khoury Penabad Studio. And this is a project that was in the heart of the Miami Design District. So we had been approached by a developer who was actually quite instrumental in revitalizing this particular neighborhood. He had decided to commission a new master plan that he worked on with DPZ that would introduce a new streetscape, break up some of the blocks, and he wanted to create a new vibrant center for the design trade, a place where public art could be showcased and where architects and designers and showrooms could kind of cohabitate together. And he turned to us and to Carrie and Adib towards designing a project that included 2 new buildings, which you see in red here, which would be retail buildings in a pretty urban fabric. We were attached on both sides to existing buildings, and to create a plaza, which would be a place of civic and communal gathering for the neighborhood. So the existing site was just asphalt, and it was all basically used for parking. So it was somewhat derelict. So we worked on transforming the existing parking lot into the first public plaza for the neighborhood. We introduced a new street that bisected these 2 blocks where we found ourselves deploying architectural elements for our work. We decided to try preserve an existing strand of mature 150-year-old oaks And Khoury and Adib focused on this building, which was a thin retail building fronting the plaza with a deep loggia. We designed this building, and then in collaboration with Khoury and Adib, we also designed this building and specifically looked to having a common approach here, thinking that we felt that if we could collaborate, it gave us an opportunity to deliver an urbanism that would be conducive and better for the overall fabric of the town. And that we would attempt to create a memorable civic realm and a public realm that we felt would be enhanced by the two firms collaborating together. So we worked on the bay structure here. The two buildings have a similar bay structure. It's the same depth for these galleries and the same height. And then the two buildings were treated in similar but different ways. These were some of the renderings that we produced for the developers, some of the initial sketches. So you see the different, this is the two retail buildings, which were going to be just 2-story. They were flanked on one side by a tall 1-story, and here by not a very tall 2-story building, but we used a similar theme for the fenestration. And then both of these buildings were surmounted by these deep and tall loggias on the second floor. The wider building had a 3-part loggia, and then this building was a little bit different. It was narrower, so we treated this a little bit like a proscenium, forcing the perspective back towards the entry. As you can see from the section here, we were very deliberate about setting our floor plates and creating the same floor to ceiling ratio in both the buildings. For the retail ground floor, the arcade shared pretty much the same width. And you see here that the office space above was also treated with the same ceiling height, and we also decided to kind of match the parapet height at the top. On the bottom here are some of the views of these kind of majestic oaks that were able to provide just incredible shade as the project kind of matured and came to fruition. So we decided that we were going to be a little bit bold, and we wanted to introduce some color. And even though the final effect was not quite as bold as what you see, we made a point of asking the developer if he would allow us to introduce a new material, just cobblestone, in between these two buildings, both to kind of, even though the street was vehicular and pedestrian, to kind of slow traffic down. And we wanted to try also string lights in between the double gallery to create, to make the space more enjoyable for when it was closed down to cars and it became just mostly pedestrian. Here are some of the images of the finished buildings. So you see, we ended up with more muted colors, but in this building, we introduced colored concrete tile that was inlaid flush with the stucco, had metal railings that were introduced here, both at the front and then also at the gallery. We did the same thing in this building, but just with a slightly different motif. You see the street here that was introduced leading back to the plaza, and then the stringing of the lights in between. This was the Khoury and Adib's project with this is a restaurant space, and this was a tall loggia, and this was all of the oaks that were safeguarded. And it stood like this for a good 8 to 10 years, and it was recently, unfortunately, torn down to make way for higher building, but it actually existed for quite a while, so we were grateful for that. These are some of the details that I like to show because they kind of became a precursor to some of the work that Eric and I found ourselves doing. We use the star motif a lot in our work. This is the gallery along the frontage right here, so with the inverted arches and then a different color accentuating that little motif. Also using it at the base to accentuate this, using colored concrete Cuban tile, which is very prevalent in Miami, as the forming of the Capitol, and at the engaged piers here in between the galleries. And here you see the other building that was adjacent to it, again, introducing color, painting the ceiling, and this building was clad in Bezaza tile. They were really generous and actually donated a lot of the tile to the project as they were hoping to work and future collaboration with a lot of the architects who were doing work there. So this was our first urban project in Miami, and we were really kind of happy with the collaboration and excited that we were given that opportunity for a firm that was relatively new. We were grateful that the developer kind of took a risk hiring us. So now I'm going to transition to Alice Beach, where we were lured in 2003. Andres Duani recommended that Eric and I take the job to be town architects for Alice. He had just recently completed, this was his third new urbanist town, following in the footsteps of Seaside and Rosemary Beach. And he knew that the developer was going to be quite ambitious, was going to hire a construction company, was determined to be kind of faithful to the master plan that he had developed. And unlike Seaside and unlike Rosemary Beach, Andres and his team came up with a different type of language for Alice Beach. And it wasn't necessarily based on precedent. It was a little bit of an invented style, but leaning heavily on past traditions. And let me go to here. So Andres decided to talk to a lot of people who were living in his towns in Seaside and Rosemary Beach, and wanted to get a handle on lessons learned. What did people enjoy about living where they were? What were some of the things that they felt could be improved? And one of the things he heard a lot from people was that more and more people were moving here full time, wanted to live here full time, so therefore desired more privacy. And so he was also kind of acutely aware of kind of this increased rise in hurricanes, a crisis with climate change. And so he and his team decided to marry the typology of the patio house that rooted strongly in Latin America and South America, but in this particular case, specifically Antigua, Guatemala. And he came up with the idea of, well, instead of giving each house their 5-foot side setbacks and separating each house by about 10 feet, you got to remember that land is really valuable here. He thought, well, how about you take the building walls and you actually push them out to the edges of the lot, and you give everybody a beautiful courtyard or an outdoor room. And so because the Alice Beach would become very much about also composing streetscapes and wanting that to be cohesive and harmonious, he decided to look at the architecture of Bermuda. And it was an all-white masonry. Bermuda is on an island that is actually set on a bed of limestone, so they're kind of used to weather storms. And they have very simple roofs, whitewashed masonry and stucco. They have the very distinctive profiled roof line with mitered ridge tile at the roof, which makes for a very clean look. Buildings are kind of grouped into compounds to form perimeter walls, very conducive to courtyard living. And so that became the initial idea, and it's still true to this day, of the kind of the first vision for Alice Beach. And obviously over the years, whether it's through our work or through the work of the many architects who have worked in Alice Beach, it has evolved a little bit, kind of naturally. Working strictly in the language of Bermuda, we all figured out after a while was a little bit limiting. So over the years, we and other architects have infused it with Moorish elements, with Spanish elements, with Mediterranean, Greek, and Roman elements as well. And we will start to see that in our work. So we did take a trip to Antigua, Guatemala, which was extraordinarily helpful. It was a very urban place. Facades come straight to the street. And a lot of them have these extraordinarily beautiful, intricate gates where you catch a glimpse into very tropical, lush courtyards. They are connected to courtyards where you can kind of get a glimpse. It reveals just a little bit, not a lot, just enough to be tantalizing. And there's enormous emphasis placed on outdoor rooms, whether they be galleries like this that are attached to narrow pools. This is in a beautiful little inn called Posada San Angel. Eric and I have looked at this photo so many times and drawn inspiration from it, to the kind of the sculpted openings, to the introduction of color where it became necessary, to the introduction of screens around windows, corner elements, profiled arches. All of this has kind of helped infuse the architecture and the typology of the work we've done here in Alice. And here are some images of, albeit modest, homes in Bermuda, but this definitely has been the basis for a lot of the work in Alice Beach. You'll see a little buttery here, which we'll talk to. A buttery is a little building in Bermuda that serves for the storage of cold goods, including butter, hence the name. But this kind of pyramid roof also has come to symbolize some of the more kind of iconic shapes, and certainly the stepped pyramid roof is now the kind of the, everybody knows you're at Alice because of it. It's become the logo for Alice Beach. So this was the original plan for the original charrette, and I believe Stefanos and Liz were there with their team for the original charrette. It is 158 acres, so it's about twice the size of Seaside and 1.5 times the size of Rosemary Beach. Alice Beach is approved for a total of 899 residential units, although we likely will not get to that. It may end up being closer to 750. This is the plan as it stands today, and you'll notice that basically the block structure has stayed essentially the same. The plan was really thoughtfully laid out with very clear views to the Gulf. The developer he didn't want to feel disoriented anywhere, whether you were on the north side of the property, on the south side, so he wanted very clear views. Andres wanted the cars to disappear. So every other street is a vehicular one, and then in between there are pedestrian alleys with parking courts caught in the middle of the block. So what ends up happening is that many of the cars actually disappear. They end up being within the courts, and it just makes for an urban streetscape that's a lot more interesting because you don't have cars everywhere. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the master plan because I'll dig into a little bit more details when we get there. But the major changes, I would say, and I'll get into it a little bit more as I talk about future projects, is we did eventually have to introduce a lake here, which you see Lake Maryland here, and this had to do with the need for having a reservoir that we needed for irrigation. The developer decided they were very interested in having the retail for Alice Beach be essentially mostly on the north side of what is our county road, Highway 30A, which is kind of a scenic road that you can take, and therefore wanted an amphitheater. And so this is a little bit different than this, where the retail initially had been thought to kind of march down all the way down to the beach, where there would be this kind of monumental plaza with mixed-use buildings flanking it. That changed at some point, and this is now what Alice Beach looks like. This was the charrette drawings that were generated for the different types of homes that would be at Alice. What's really interesting to me when I look at these today, so 17 years post the charrette, is how really charming and picturesque and beautiful and modest these homes are. And actually it's not quite what we're getting at Alice now, where more and more people are moving. Land value is extraordinarily high, and so people kind of want to maximize their investment. And but we've tried to stay faithful to a lot of the different typologies that you see right here. So one interesting exercise that we did very early on in January 2004, we gathered 10 architects in Miami with DPZ very much present. And the developer had decided that they were going to start on the north side, and they were going to design 16 homes, 8 on either side of a pedestrian path. And so the 10 architects were given different assignments, and a lot of the elements that go into composing a town and certainly working on zero lot line homes came into play here. We had to work out a lot of things, such as, are we going to become overly prescriptive? Are we going to tell people where they can put their second floor windows? We decided no. It was very important that when you were in the mid block of a house that you could enjoy complete privacy in the courtyards. And that we pay very close attention to that. We always do that. Now, once you get to the detached type, it's obviously a lot more difficult to guarantee. We can't actually guarantee privacy, but we do what we can to encourage owners to enclose their courtyard so that they do really become rooms. But we worked on roof pitches. We worked on the different design elements, the gifts to the streets that were given along the pedestrian path, where we actually had broader setbacks. And I remember doing this exercise and Andres and DPZ critiquing every individual architect individually. And then we all kind of made the changes, and then we all came back and posted our work together. We composed the street, and Andres was still quite horrified. And he said to everybody, go back and keep editing, keep editing. It's really important that you do that, because you should not look at each individual house. It is really much about composing the street. So we have tried to take that, certainly in the work that we do as town architects, and we are quite rigorous. We try to be quite rigorous in our review with other architects, always telling them, edit down, edit as much as possible. And you don't have to do a fireplace and a chimney and a fountain and a stoop and planters on your front facades. Please use some of that in the private realm of your house. I'm not going to focus too much on this, but certainly it's always interesting to me, because people always ask, well, what's the town architect responsibilities? And so I thought it'd be interesting. So first and foremost, we're the keeper of the vision that DPZ established, and we work with the developers team on their goals and their objectives. We try to make sure that everybody's working, adhering to the codes as they've been established. And I should say that, the codes in Alice are, they're quite intense, and deliberately so. The developer was committed to to designing a town that was going to have a long legacy, that would be as sustainable as possible. So every structure in Alice has to meet the fortified standards, which is building above and beyond what the Florida Building Code mandates, and being really truly able to withstand hurricane force winds. And also to the Florida Green Building Coalition. So owners and architects are encouraged to be smart in the use of materials that are used, woods that are used, and the like. So we work, whether we work on our own architecture in our own landscape, or whether we work with other architects and other landscape architects, always trying to make sure that nothing is being done to dilute the vision. We complete design review. We have done the design of quite a few of the civic buildings, the park. We have we worked on the first town center building, and then we do custom residential assignments as well. And one of the most fascinating parts, I would say, for the past 17 years as being town architect, has been really being able to work with a lot of extraordinarily talented architects. We stay in touch with sales and marketing. They obviously are a huge driving force. They're the ones who are the first receivers of what people are wanting. So we're constantly in communication with them. We work with the many different departments that deal with infrastructure. Taking the lessons of Seaside and Rosemary Beach and other places, we really kind of wanted as much of the infrastructure to be buried as possible. The developer was fully in agreement with that. So we work with a multitude of people to try and make sure that happens. Overall selections for the town, support sales, as I say, and then one of the most really kind of rewarding parts, and especially being an architect and a practicing one, has been being able to work in collaboration with the hugely vast, talented sets of builders and their subs who work. 30A in our little area has been able to cultivate, because of Seaside and because of Rosemary, and now certainly because of Alice, really extraordinary craftsmen. And we were not particularly spoiled coming from Miami, and we have been now very spoiled working here for a long time. They are exacting, and they are rigorous, and they are judicious, and they respect details, and they execute them quite faithfully. And so that is really quite wonderful. Whoops, sorry. One other thing that I thought maybe certainly architecture students would find that interesting is Eric and I decided early on that we wanted to keep a NOLI plan of Alice Beach. We thought it'd be interesting so what you actually see in gray, with a very few exceptions, is houses that are either completed or under construction or in design and have been committed to by the developer. And that is, and so we wanted to show the separation. What is in the gray right here are the conditioned areas, and it was important for us to kind of show the covered, unconditioned, and courtyard spaces, so the semi-private spaces, and how in each individual home and how they related to the pedestrian path, how they related to the streets, where entrances were. We always found ourselves being able to take advantage. For example, when we first designed this green, we knew what each one of these houses looked like. So we were able to design this focusing an entrance here and an entrance here on the axes of this house, which was quite it was fortuitous, but having the architecture already in place really enabled us to do that. So this is a plan that we use for every building, and we find that it makes for a really kind of interesting map of the town. And this is a quick aerial shot of where we stand today at Alice Beach. We have about, I would say, 200 and maybe 60 completed homes, another 70 or so under construction, and probably another 50 to 60 in design review. So within, 2 to 3 years, maybe 4 years, we'll be double what we are here. We always find that it's just as interesting walking along the streets and experiencing all of the architecture at the pedestrian level, but it's also actually quite fascinating to be viewing this and being in the skyline of these roofs, which are really sculptural. So our very, very first building for Alice was actually the sales center. And we had to establish an urban type that Andres had established at the Courtyard house and develop an architectural syntax that was going to be used as a precedent for all of the other homes that were going to get built here. And so we decided that the sales center, we would design it like a typical courtyard house. And I should say that this is, when we first started working on this, it was a little bit counterintuitive to what some people were used to. A lot of people in Rosemary Beach had chosen to do the upside down floor plans with living on the second floor, trying to gain views of the Gulf. That is quite antithetical to courtyard living. And so we wanted to encourage the use of living on the first floor, where you could expand naturally and graciously from your living rooms out towards galleries and courtyards, and that your galleries and courtyards did become a natural extension of the public gathering spaces of the house. So we wanted to encourage courtyards on the first floor and then work more with terraces as opposed to towers popping up everywhere. And so this was designed very much with the thought that it could eventually convert to a house. Well, this would be the master wing. It's all one story. On the western facade, which was here where we knew we would have houses to the north, we wanted the scale to be relatively domestic. And then on the broad facade of the south, we wanted this one, since it shows up, it was visible from 30A, we wanted it to be inviting, emblematic of what the architecture in Alice Beach would eventually look. We introduced a little buttery roof. We introduced a scalloped gable profile here. The sash window, which is predominantly used as opposed to a casement. The courtyard with openings in the courtyard to facilitate cross ventilation, and then galleries. And here are some of the images of the first building, the sales center here. This is what you see here in the background is the first 16 homes as they started to go up. And these are just some of the forms showing how even when you're working just in the simple language of masonry, you can get quite sculptural. And introduced here kind of a Chippendale balcony, both here and here at these openings, kind of as a nod to the Bermuda architecture. And the shellstone, which has been deployed a lot, and then use some cedar wood for the articulation of the gallery that was attached to the living spaces. We next moved on to Fonzo Press, and Fonzo Press was conceived initially of the third place of this burgeoning community. It was to be a little bookstore and a place for coffee in the morning, and après beach, as it was aptly named by the first operator, for wine and cheese, maybe after one was done with the beach. So we were told we couldn't occupy a lot of space. We were given a pretty limited space that we could work with. So the interior of the building is actually only 600 square feet, and it became a counter and a bookstore and a place where you could have the daily kind of coffee and wine. And so to expand the footprint beyond that, we decided to introduce two courts, one which we call the Sunrise Court, and then one which is the Sunset. So the Sunrise obviously on the east, the Sunset Court on the west side, take advantage of the setting sun. Over the years, and especially working with white stucco architecture, the hues that you get from the extraordinary sunsets here, be it the pinks and the oranges at sunrise, and then the purples and the reds at sunset, make for just beautiful play of shadow and light on these facades. the houses at Alice all get a steel troweled stucco, so it's extraordinarily shiny, and you actually can see the hand that has applied it. So you get that reflectivity, and you get those hues, which are really beautiful. So again, just like the sales center, we wanted the scale of the very first building to be a little bit more domestic. We wanted this to feel a little bit like a front porch, which we deployed some bamboo awning here where you can kind of sit a little bit under the shade, and then wanted something with a little bit more monumentality facing 30A. And the Sunset Court is basically designed as it was a trellis court, tetrapylon, 9 grid of columns, which you see right here. So forming a 9 square here with perimeter benches on the end. And I'll go to this image here. This was taken in the very early years of Fonville. Eventually this got to grow, and all of this became covered in vines. So we got this dangling garden effect while still being able to modulate the light. The butteries became, the butteries were designed, DPZ designed the entrance and the exit of Alice Beach on the east end and the north end. And so we just took kind of the idea that they had of the original charrette and worked on just attenuating it slightly. So we wanted to design these at the steep profiles that they would be quite noticeable, using the stepped roof profile that we became synonymous with Alice, introduced little dovecotes so that they could kind of shine at night. And then you see them here. And then because they were actually in the right-of-way, and we had to negotiate with the county to allow that to happen, we actually were able to place in the within here all of the irrigation and the electrical control for the main boulevard, for all of the electrical and irrigation needs. And so I think today we would probably have a very hard time getting these approved in the right of way, but back in 2003 it was approved. And so you now know that you've entered and you've exited Alice Beach when you kind of go through this gateway of these 2 butteries on both the east and the north, east and west end. So our first kind of public, the main kind of civic building was the Kalisa Pool, and it was located on the north corner. The site naturally splayed, and it opened up to what was 20 acres of preserve here to the north. And we positioned the building. We figured out that the corner right here actually was at the confluence, or where we had 2 important axes that merged. When you turned onto this street right there, and when you turned onto this street, you met right at this corner. So we started off with wanting to design a little tower-like element here. And then we started with looking at the geometry of the site and how we could organize the different functions of Kalisa, following some principles and some leaning back on traditional forms that we wanted to deploy here. So we modestly were inspired by Michelangelo's Campidoglio for a site that deals really brilliantly with splayed sides, and started off with a huge elliptical pool in the center of the site that's 50 feet by 100 feet. We then, we had a long conversation with the developer about should the buildings be a different color or should they be white? And we ultimately decided for a white exterior because all of these different buildings, because it was a commercial pool, had to be completely enclosed within building walls. And then we deployed the color on the inside, painting some of the walls bright red and others yellow and the like. So, sorry, I'm going to go back to this is the entry tower. This was a big living room. And these buildings, we were inspired by the Greek agora and the stoas and we used kind of that as a way of organizing the different elements for the houses, for the functions of the pool. So we had the bar and the kitchen here, flanked on either side by some loggias that are used for dining. The lap pool, which was trellised, was anchored on both ends by some bathhouses that we looked at the Roman Atrium as a source of inspiration for this. We then had a alley of palms that we located right here, on axis with the little fountain pool house that held all of the equipment. And then we stepped down to a lower terrace where we introduced some cabanas with a children's pool right here. So this is one photograph of Kalisa, the entry tower here with the 4 posts that act as a kind of a lantern, letting people know that you've arrived. It's again a tetrapylon right here, the living room, and then the different buildings here. These are some views. We were able to work on this building is very much inspired, I should say, by Moroccan architecture. And so we introduced, for the first time in Alice, some profiled arches here, worked a lot with wood and screens, ebonized and the like, custom designed a Moroccan light fixture that was hanging in the center of the tower so it could be very visible as you were coming in and kind of clearly mark the entrance. Here are some images that we use. We remember showing these to the developer at the time and saying, okay, these are some stoas, and the Greek marketplace and the agora became really the source of inspiration for how we decided that we would organize the buildings around the pool, the center pool, which is designed as a flat negative, or just infinity edge, but laid flat with the stone paving. Whoops. For the bathhouses, we looked at the Roman atrium, and other than the kitchen, nothing was air conditioned in this building. So it was really important for us to make sure that everything cross-ventilated properly. So we would encourage the Venturi effect and move hot air through the buildings so that we could create a comfortable environment. So both the men and the women's bathrooms have a compluvium and an impluvium here, and we have screens to allow the hot air to rise and get out of the buildings. And these were just some of the inspiration images that helped inform what these would look like. And then towards the north end, we looked at the treasury houses as a means of inspiration, again, for how we would deploy the cabanas at the north end, flanking the children's pool area. And so this was the kid pool, which we decided we could be a little bit whimsical and a little bit playful with this. Wanted to provide a shade canopy. We have some snakes coiled around the columns as fountains. The pool is not very deep, so young kids could swim in it without fear of drowning. And then these became the little cabanas, and there's a cabana that anchored in between. There are gardens in between each. You see here how they cross-ventilate in all 4 directions. So even in the heat of the summer, they actually are quite comfortable to be in. We've noticed over the years what a huge difference it makes, because sometimes when it rains, we may pull down a screen here, and as soon as the air is trapped, it feels immediately 10 degrees to 20 degrees warmer within the space. Next, I spoke initially about we needed a reservoir to deal with the kind of increasing irrigation needs that we were going to have at Alice. And Andres had playfully said to us one day, put in a windmill. I don't care even if you have to convert frog piss into something, but introduce a windmill. There's a little bit of wind in the north. See what you can do with it. So this kind of man-made lake was introduced in Alice. It is actually fed by 7 wells that are on site. We designed a little windmill that was here that operates a pump. This pump aerates the water, and the natural ions that are in the water, so that they don't leave yellow stains on the walls, naturally settle to the bottom of the water. The clear water rises, and then it is used to provide irrigation for the town. So we were able to do that. This was a vehicular street. We designed a bridge here that is vehicular, marked by a tower-like element. This facade is exactly facing south. And then we had a small little pedestrian bridge at the base of the lake. This is at the very north end of the very first path that was designed, so all the way from the preserve all the way down to the beach. So it's a straight shot, and when you are actually on this pedestrian path, because of the kind of natural topography that we have, you do get to see the ocean when you're walking along the path. we get the question all the time, where did the name Lake Maryland come? And the reason is while it was being sketched in the initial workshop, Eric decided to get playful with it, and he found that the forms reminded him of somebody who was quite voluptuous. So Lake Maryland came about, and the name has kind of stuck, and the little bridge is her belt buckle right here. Next, we're going to go to the very first public gathering space to the beach. So we were given the task of designing some restrooms. Doesn't sound particularly exotic, but we understood that this was going to be kind of an inaugural moment for the town's beachside development, and that it needed to, it was going to have a special termination point for the end of the walk, so it had a strong axial termination. And because of the width of the overall plaza, we felt that we wanted to do something a little bit monumental. And so the idea came about of, so here are the, we designed 2 pavilions that have they are fronted before you get to them by a green where you ramp up or you step up. So you have a raised green that in turn you have additional steps, but you can also have a ramp up here to a wooden platform where anybody from the neighborhood can come and sit and watch the sunset. So this is very much a public gathering space for everybody. We chose to kind of clad these bathrooms in the fish scales that you see here, which to us could be reminiscent of both the fish and the waves of the ocean. And we actually poured in place some huge urns that were planted. And we had, by doing some quick studies, we don't really see it here. When you're actually, this is about 32 feet above the water. So when you're actually on the beach, way down, these urns look like they are floating above the dunes. So initially when this was first designed, everybody felt, oh my gosh, they're a little too monumental. But as one can see, when the houses started flanking them, they took on a smaller character, and they seem actually fitting to the scale that one sees here, with the architecture around it being quite intense. Then we got the chance to design another set of pavilions, restroom pavilions, to another access point on the beach. And by this point, we had kind of learned some good lessons. It was interesting that we looked at the forms of some Roman tombs and mausoleums. We were fascinated by the plan of this, and had the idea of designing. We had to pay very close attention at this point when this project was designed. There was enormous pressure from sales, understandably, about protecting the views and not designing anything that could impede somebody's view of the beach and the Gulf. So we very consciously decided to design these pavilions at a much smaller scale, where we didn't want to get much higher than the height of the dunes. And so we had to step down. So you actually step down into the restrooms. So we were able to keep the scale of these relatively modest, while still having it serve its function. And so here you see these, which are definitely a lot more modest. They also have a green right in front of them with houses now. Well, this is a completed house, and the house going up right now here. Next, we were asked, and this was an interesting project. So right immediately south of the Kalisa Pool, there was a large site that had been designed for either homes or row houses. And the developer asked us to design a series of 9 row houses. 7 of them are 18 feet in width, and the 2 ones that anchor the ends are 29 feet in width. Very much in the kind of Anglo tradition of the English row house. But this site was important for a number of reasons. We thought that, again, DPZ rather masterfully had decided to kind of splay the site for the houses, creating an opportunity for green here and opening it up onto the civic kind of plaza of the Kalisa Pool. And this was a major axis of one of the main streets in Alice Beach, McGee. And so we decided to terminate this green centered between Kalisa and McGee. There was a point that we decided that we had to use it to mark something, and it has become the place where a sculpture has gone up. But this green also became a little bit analogous to a private green for these homes. So the 18-foot wide and the 29-foot wide unit deploy a lot of the same elements. Because it was on a relatively public pathway, we thought it was prudent and desirable to raise the very first floor plan. So you have, by way of, there's a little bit of privacy by way of these planters and this stoop, but as soon as you come into whether you're coming into the 18-foot unit or the 29-foot unit, you're immediately going up a half flight of stairs. And then the living dining occupies the whole width of the lot, both for the 29-foot unit and also for the 18-foot unit. The courtyard width in all of the units is also exactly the same. So you have that continuity across the whole block of homes, with the garages being located here. And then from the courtyard, you would go up then to a raised loggia that was attached to a guest bedroom suite. So sequentially, you had a series of pretty interesting spaces that offered you a lot of privacy and different experiences. You could sit out here in a covered but unconditioned space, here in the space that is completely open to above. And we had very tall ceilings, 16-foot high ceilings in these spaces. The rest of the second floor plan, on the larger unit, the master is on the same floor as the living dining, but in the narrower unit, it's by itself half a level up from the other bedroom. And then the additional bedroom 3 and 4 are above at the second floor here. But what's nice is when you're in this unit and you're already about 5 feet above grade, you have a tremendous amount of privacy and you don't need to really worry about anybody walking by. So in section, it became interesting to study this. And you see here how we're coming up to the floor, and you have the 16-foot high ceiling in the living dining that opens up to the courtyard that is landscaped, how the loggia sits half a flight above the courtyard. The garage is kind of tucked nondescriptly kind of underneath the house. It doesn't need to be very tall. And the master bedroom here on this level sits by itself with a secondary bedroom here. And in the larger unit, you see again the same relationship of the finished first floor to the grade, up half a flight of stairs with the master and the living dining. The courtyard in this case, because it's on the end unit, can take advantage of an opening in the courtyard wall just for a little bit more cross ventilation. But again, the same idea here with the garage tucked underneath and the guest suite and the loggia sitting half a level above the courtyard. Exactly the same as the 18-foot wide unit. And so you see the assembly of the row houses right here with the planters. This is a sculpture that actually terminates the axes along the green. It became fortuitous that we were able to actually place her there. She was selected by the family who owns the property. I'm blanking out on her name briefly, but she's supposed to be evocative of free spirit and the love of life. So you see here how the row houses kind of naturally opened up and revealed the facade of Kalisa Pool, how the green got to be a little bit wider. We did introduce a sidewalk so that you would have kind of a natural way of getting to your individual residences that are all kind of tucked in between the planters. And we introduced trellises above the kitchen windows in the narrower units where we have vines with rosemary and growing up, so we could have something fragrant here. And this now, over the years, this is kind of filled in, and it's quite beautiful. Now I'm going to shoot down to the Gulf front, or the Gulf side. The original DPZ master plan had a continuation of the fabric here, but orienting the lots north-south to kind of take advantage of the views. But at this point, we had started working on a separate project with Dimitri Porphyrios. And the developer at one point said to him, hey, do you have any ideas how we can maybe better maximize the value of this land? And he came up with something that was quite interesting. He took those 2 blocks and decided to carve up the lots into much smaller spaces where the footprint of the house was prescribed, and the courtyard space was prescribed for each house. This way ensuring that even second and third and sometimes fourth tier of homes had guaranteed views. So then it became our job to make sure that any architect designing houses here had to work within a very tight language to make sure that these views were certainly above the first floor, could be protected in perpetuity. So, view corridors like this were designed so that the sales team could show everybody, well, if you buy this house, for example, which was this one, here's where you may have a more frontal view, here's where your view is going to be a little bit more oblique. If you are here, for example, which corresponded to this site right here, where you obviously had a much more expansive view corridor, but you could also take advantage of a narrow corridor, a little bit more oblique here. So this became a little bit like a jigsaw puzzle, but it was fascinating. The developer was able to carve the lots into much smaller. Because we did that, we had to automatically allow the houses to get 3 stories tall, so a little bit 1 story taller than everything around them. But it worked out really great. And so now this is a finished neighborhood, and you see, again, we continue with the Noli plan. So you see the carving out of the footprint for either courtyards or galleries and loges. So our first house here was, it was a long turtle bale. This is the little tiny bathhouses that I showed as a second example of what we did. And this is the golf green, which is a little bit wider. And here the owner had a kind of a more modest program. We were very grateful to her and her husband, because they decided that they really wanted this to be also a courtyard house. Didn't have to do that. It would have maybe been intuitive to bring the conditioned square footage all the way to the foot of where we could build. But they wanted a courtyard, and they wanted a loggia that could support being out in this courtyard. And so we worked on a plan that is relentlessly symmetrical in many different ways, but it became a natural way of organizing the partie for this house, where from the Turtle Bell Green, if you came in from the entrance, you could also exit out this way, and your view would be terminated by a fountain. If you came in through this parking court and you came in through here, you were centered on the pool and centered in a large elliptical opening. The center hallway for the first flight of stairs here was centered on the bedroom, and also centered on the loggia, which in turn was centered on the court, and a large opening here. The second floor is devoted entirely to the public rooms of the house, with an expansive porch and loggia that overlooks the courtyard below. We then introduced a stair, a much more modest stair, that then took you out to the master bedroom wing that occupied the whole 3rd floor, also with a porch overlooking both the living room loggia and the courtyard beyond, and then the 5th bedroom here. So we decided to look at the design of these a little bit like a temple precinct, I guess. We were working with very narrow fronts that were perpendicular to the shoreline, and long expanses east and west, with tightly coded as to what we could and could not do in terms of encroachment, so we didn't block anybody's view. So we wanted the house to have a very kind of strong frontal character. And so you start to see the loggias and the porches and the copper awning of the 3rd floor here. This is a view that is towards the park. So again, it had a certain amount of presence on the park. So we had a little balcony at the 2nd floor. This was an opening to the loggia with a copper hood that was suspended over an outdoor fireplace. Gates to the courtyard, and you see the living room loggia here, and then the master balcony here, supported on these columns. Some quick sections, again, showing how everything was just very strong axial connection through the different floors. Entrances both to the living and to the dining, with the kitchen wall designed as a huge, almost like a furnishing within a larger room, and then the bathroom designed as a volume within the overall master bedroom, almost like a miniature house within the master. And this section here starts to show the relationships again of the different courtyards, the loggia, the principal entry, the main stair that opened up onto the family room that had a projected bay. And then as you went up a more modest stair towards the master, where you see here the volume of the master bathroom contained within the larger space of the master bedroom, and then the relationship of the porches all kind of looking down towards the courtyard and then out towards the Gulf. So these are some of the images of the finished homes, and I won't dwell too much on them, but I will just quickly kind of go through them. You see the relationship here, the smaller baths with the house, and you see here how it sets back from to make way for that courtyard. We deployed stone here in a variety of different ways, and ipe and river recovered cypress, so that it would be relatively low maintenance for the owners. Here are some of the design elements that are deployed. The bay, the second floor. Again, we were able to get sculptural, just incredible teams. Wooden balconies, copper awnings, stone that is used judiciously in little places. We designed little acroteria here at the end, at the gable ends, and then designed lintels that were flush with the stucco to kind of accent a window. Here is the framed opening from the outdoor loggia to the courtyard, and we framed the opening to the dunes in limestone. You get a view to the pool court beyond. The same material here is used, whether it's the exact same material but used in a different number of finishes. Tumbled pavers for the courtyard, bush hammered for caps, honed for interior steps, and profiled for this framed opening. This is a view if you're coming from the parking as you come towards one of the entries, and then looking back towards an opening that we made elliptical here, a little bit more modest, but you see through to the dunes, and it's centered perfectly on the pool. These are just some views of the interior. This is the stair that leads you from the first to the second floor. We compressed the view purposefully so that you feel a little bit tunnel-like, and then you finally get to a room that was quite airy. The dining room, where we got to do a lot of custom design, from the lights to the tables to the banquette. It was a lot of fun for us. And then you culminate in this extraordinary view of the Gulf. These doors are used. We had a system of doors that we use called lift and slides that you can actually lift, and then they pocket directly into the wall. So you're able to have a huge expanse of opening when you're entertaining, and so that you have this, you are naturally able to extend the public living quarters of the house out towards the deck without having an interruption of doors. So it's quite evocative. Very simple recessed tracks for the curtains. This is the master bedroom with, you see here the volume of the master bathroom contained within the overall master bedroom, where the bathroom doesn't have to have particularly high ceilings, so it's a little bit more modest, and it was actually all clad in wood. The next house that we designed was also happened to be Gulf front, and this one, there was increased pressure here to maximize the views, and this was on a larger lot, so it was a little bit more ambitious. It also had this proximity to the public square. And again, here we kind of wanted to give a little nod to like a modest little Greek temple. It's a little bit more explicit here in terms of the composition and the details. And we had a strong base here, and then had the two and the second and the third floor contained within just some larger pilasters here, with just a simple stuccoed capital that's flush here with the rest of the element. This was a bay that was introduced at the Stair Hall, very limited in the amount of projection we could do, and then balconies a little bit broader at the second floor and stepping in at the third floor, so that there is a sense of hierarchy and proportionality to the overall space. And this, all of this became, we introduced again materials that could weather well the elements of sand and salt, which is huge. So whether it's powder-coated aluminum with wood handrails, try to make this as light as possible to maximize the views. introducing some wood, like I said, to just soften it up, and then, you know, being very judicious with the placement of the articulated base that coincided with the top of lintels and other design elements that were tied throughout the house. And again, as I talk about, you know, the pressure always to the Gulf, these are just different views from within the house, allowing views of the Gulf, which is what everybody kind of desires and wants when you get to design a custom house here. This is a view of the porch on the south side of the off from the living room, quite expansive, and you see the articulation of some of the wood here. The pool happened to be in a larger court. We actually raised it half a flight above the first floor so that we could do a disappearing edge and you could see the Gulf beyond. And then this large porch here, you see here, opens up completely to the breezes and to views. Next, we happened to design this was a small house for a really interesting client whose daughter actually happens to be attending Notre Dame School of Architecture this year. And it was, they came to us with a really kind of ambitious but not ambitious program. They wanted a small house, but they wanted it to be a little exotic, a little bit Middle Eastern, but with a very modest program. But they wanted very, very expansive outdoor living rooms. And so in this particular case, we had recently designed this pedestrian path that you see here. So we were able to design this house by strongly responding to the existing episodic moments of the landscape here. There are some raised parterres here. So the center line of this is shared with the center line of what became an entry loggia for the house. We accentuate the long axes here by designing a series of outdoor spaces. I'm going to actually go through this pretty quickly. So the first floor is all just living, dining, and kitchen, and a lot of outdoor spaces, an area where one could dine outdoors. The courtyard here that's open to above, attached to the pool, and this was a covered loggia that was attached to the recess entry, so that you could have the enjoyment of all of these areas. And then the second floor was the living quarters, with the master bedroom being over the loggia right here, with projected bays to take advantage of both the views, both towards the Gulf and then also back towards the town. Family that read a lot, so they wanted a library on their third floor, which we designed as a screened porch, pulling on the idea of the Egyptian moshrabiyeh, which is the kind of turned wood screens, and then topped with a fourth floor roof terrace. So this is what the house looks like as it engages the pedestrian path that leads to the Gulf. Like I said, this path is centered on this entry right here. This is the master bedroom with the two projected bays, and then the further projected third floor porch with the terrace above. And then the house here gets to be a lot more modest, more in keeping with the architectural and urban character of the rest of the town around it. Some views of the outdoor spaces, all sequentially aligned and forcing that perspectival view that allows you to feel that the space is maybe grander than it is. Deploying some of the same motifs that we were using outdoors on the inside as well, with some pointed arches and filtering of light throughout the house. And then this is the third floor terrace with the screens, fixed panels for the railings, and then these screens opened up perfectly, so you're able to take advantage of the prevailing breezes as well as the sunlight. Next, I'll talk about a house that was also very interesting to us. In this case, this is a family that came to us with a rather ambitious program. They wanted a house that was that would have the kind of the same exoticism that they had seen in Kalisa, and but they had a pretty fixed program, and they wanted us to separate the master wing completely from the rest of the house, but they wanted a center core that would be very conducive to the family gathering together. So again, here we had designed this park several years earlier, and so we were able to take advantage of this axis. And we have a little urban pedestrian path here. So the house is divided at the front into a two-part, one that is kind of very appropriately scaled to the rest of the town, with a language basically of solid masonry with punched openings and maybe a balcony, but with the design of a much more kind of ambitious portico that was for the Zagouan that led one to an atrium. So I'll show you photographs in a while, but the park here is centered on the Zagouan, and then the living and the dining and the kitchen is all centered as well, strongly here. The stair hall occupies a space that is around the center atrium, which became the heart of the house, with a compluvium above and an impluvium, which became a pool for the children, a slightly raised Iwan spa for the husband and wife. The master wing with complete privacy, also separated by a private court. And then on the second floor, the bedroom wing for the kids, separated from what would be the guest master for guests and visitors. And then an outdoor terrace with views below, and then leading up to a pool on the roof with views of the Gulf. So here are some of the renderings that we initially did, wanting to show the difference in character between this part of the house, which we felt needed to really belong to the rest of the town, and then being able to be a little bit more playful and monumental with the entry into the atrium. We'll show you some images just in a bit. The atrium here we were able to get to 18 feet high. We felt it was important for the scale of the space to be really, really important. And the master bedroom as well, though, does not share the scale of this. It's a little bit more modest, but it has an open court, open to above, that we landscaped and introduced a fountain for privacy. And then the bathroom is tucked in the back with a clear story at the top that you don't really see, but that washes the light beautifully through the spaces. And then the rest on the second floor was much more modest, whether it's the guest bedroom wing or the secondary bedrooms with the not so modest pool on the roof. So this is a view of the park and of the entry. I'll go here to, you see the house here, responding to the urban character of the town. And here, as I was saying before, we work with great craftsmen who can do anything that we draw. And so you see some of the motif here that we kind of repeat throughout the house in many different ways. And here it happens to be carved out of concrete. This is the atrium, with a pool in the center and some fish mosaic for the kids. The compluvium is supported by these tapered wood columns that also became the base for some fountains spilling into the pool. And then the ceiling was a wood star ceiling, and you see here some of the detailing around the compluvium. This is a view of the entrance, again, with just large gates leading into the Zagouan, a Moroccan light fixture. Something as subtle as just playing with integrally colored stucco against a white stucco or slightly canted form for an outdoor fireplace. Again, just adding a little bit of exoticism to the space. The living and the dining and the kitchen. I'll go kind of fast through some of the interior spaces. Our practice does focus a lot on interiors, and we do quite a lot of that. So wanted to show some of that work, but be conscious of the fact that didn't want to dwell too much on that. But at the stair hall as well, where we were able to really mold the forms of plaster, we introduced some clear stories at the top, and so it washes just beautifully with light up here. This is the private court between the master bedroom and then the master bathroom. So again, really kind of exotic and completely private, where they could retreat back to themselves. And then the children's quarters being a little bit more playful with color. And then some of the details, we pay a lot of close attention to that in our work, in terms of how materials come together, how corners are cut, how materials can be bent and twisted in ways that are a little bit inventive. And then this is a great shot of the being on the pool and looking towards the Gulf and looking back towards the roofline and the terraces of Alice Beach. I find that really evocative. We'll talk a little bit about town center. So the Lucian was the first town center building that we designed, and it anchored this the southwest corner of the amphitheater. I will be showing very quickly some images of the other work. But so this is the Lucian, this is the May that was designed by Scott Merrill. These are two buildings designed by Hart Howerton, and this building is currently designed by Moreland Polizoidis, and I'll get to that at the end. But here we had to find a language for a mixed-use 4-story building that would complement both the scale of the residential architecture immediately adjacent. And so, we went the route here of a more highly kind of abstract tectonic language, I should say. The first floor is all, there's an underground parking, and then the first floor is restaurant. And then the second, third, and fourth floor were apartment buildings. Again, there's a lot of pressure from sales as to how to maximize views, meaning this had to be supportive of expansive balconies with views of the south and back, towards the water. A gallery at the rear that allowed you entrances into the different units. A common loggia from the elevator and the stair lobby at the first floor that allows one to take views of or partake in the life of the amphitheater. So both the second and the third floor are pretty much identical, with 2 1-bedroom units and then 2 2-bedroom units. And then the fourth floor are 2 3-bedroom units. But again, being conscious of the 3-bay structure that we had worked on. So on the fourth floor, this one it's the master suite that belongs to this unit. These are some of the images that we actually did prior to the building being completed. So you see the taller necessary space, first floor, raised. It occupies this presence where you have a lower plaza for the restaurant to spill over into, as well as a semi-private plaza right here. Oh, Eric, sorry, do you have my charger? I need it, my computer's about to die. At home.
Oh, no.
Yikes. Sorry, I'm sending my husband to pick up the charger. I hope I don't lose this. Here are some views of the Lucian, and I may have to go, I hope I don't, but the finished Lucian building. I want to know, how am I doing on time, Stefanos? I don't want to take up too much time. I'm going to skip through this, just again showing some more views, because I do want to end up on a large part of our work has been working with with landscape, and we have found that to be fascinating, and to be able to kind of seamlessly weave the landscape with the urbanism and the architecture has been endlessly fascinating. We have an amazing landscape designer who works on staff at Alice, who's a wealth of information in terms of the plant materials that do well for both salt air and the sun. And so these are some of the public spaces that we have designed over the years. And I'm going to get quickly to just talk a little bit, as I alluded to in the very beginning, what has been endlessly fascinating to us and really rewarding is working with some really talented architects. So this is a beautiful building that Scott Merrill designed on the opposite end of the amphitheater. So kind of bookended the Lucian and the May. He designed this building with a series of shutters that can open and close as the residents come. So the building is constantly changing in elevation. Along the Gulf of Mexico, adjacent to the kind of the monumental plaza that will be there, are 2 condo buildings that he designed that have just been introduced to the market. So we'll hopefully be breaking ground within the next 6 months. 2 buildings, each with 6 condominiums, so a total of 12 condominiums on the Gulf. But you see the kind of the strong language that he's established here. We are limited to no more than 50 feet in the county that we work in. And so that is, it's key that we do not go beyond that. The Camden and the Whitby, designed by Hart Howerton, just north of the Lucian, also open onto the amphitheater. And then I'm going to end with the town center building. So Moulin Paul Resorts was given the task a couple of years ago of designing a building that would anchor the north end of the amphitheater. So it's a very strong, it's an important site for Alice Beach. It anchors the north end, and they had to design something that was going to have a very strong presence along the amphitheater. So this is the facade as it's been designed, with a strong arcade at the bottom for restaurants and businesses, with the residential programming above, also with the explicit instruction to design broad porches with a lot of visibility for the residential programming. And they've marked the kind of north, the southwest corner with a tower, as this is one of the principal thoroughfares in Alice, and then have kind of masterfully, Liz, when she was presenting the project, thought it was really important to break down the scale of the buildings at the rear to be more responsive to the more residential character at the back of these neighborhoods, and so didn't want the architecture to be quite as imposing. And so it's been quite a feat of architecture and jigsaw puzzle working to make to be able to articulate these volumes in a way that the overall massing can actually break down a little bit and correspond more with the character of the residential homes in Alice Beach. And then on that note, I'm going to, before my computer dies down, I'm going to end up on this view of Alice as seen from the water, taken probably about 6-7 months ago. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Marieanne, for a marvelous presentation. Mary Beth, do we have any questions?
Yes, so we'll get through as many as we can before you leave us.
Mary Beth, if for whatever reason I lose you, I'm going to pick you up immediately on my phone. But I know Eric went to get my charger, but I'll call in immediately on my phone.
Okay, so we just have a couple of questions. The first one is from Professor Philip Bess. Phil has asked some about the local community of builders in Alice Beach. Is it a permanent population, and how large is it, and where do the builders come from? What are their range of skills, and what are their long-range prospects in the area once Alice Beach has been fully built out?
So, you know, Alice Beach is one of just many, many projects that are being currently built in this little area. I think about 2 years ago, Walton County was one of the 5th fastest growing counties in the US. There is
I think we lost her, but she's coming back on the phone. Let's be patient for a second.
Stephanos, while we wait, do you have anything to add about the building she was talking about that your firm had completed?
No, actually, it's a building that has been spearheaded by Liz Moll, my partner, and it has been a building that has grown very slowly. One of the great frustrations of architectural practice is how sometimes buildings take 3 and 4 and 5 years to be designed and built, because of all kinds of internal issues with the development process. This has been a start and go building for a long time. We're still at early schematic design, and we're hoping that we'll complete this building shortly, maybe beginning early next year, to be maybe built out by 2023. And it's a building that is like much else on Alice Beach. In the whole project is built in reinforced concrete. And this area, there are a lot of issues around Alice Beach worth talking about. Well, one of them is that there was a hurricane that landed very close there. I think last year and a half ago, 18 months ago, that demolished much around it, and the town of Alice Beach remained totally intact because of its construction type.
You made it back.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. As the students and faculty are well aware, 2020 has been the year of tech snafus and problems. So,
well, my computer's supposed to actually last longer than an hour, but nonetheless, yeah, I wanted to say, so Walton County is actually expanding quite a lot, and there's a tremendous amount of projects, a lot of renovation projects in Seaside and Rosemary Beach. St. Joe is building up a lot. So there have been, the sub base has definitely grown over the years. And there are, most of them I would say live, probably about 10 years ago, there were very few options of where one could live close to 30A and close to, let's say, Seaside and Rosemary Beach and Watercolor and Alice. That has kind of changed over the past couple of years with kind of more affordable housing being built along 98, which is the highway that kind of runs parallel to 30A, parallel to the coastline. But a lot of the builders and craftsmen that we work with actually choose to live further north where they can live much more expansively. And some of them live on properties that their families have owned for a long time, and whether it's farmland or horseland or the like. So it's kind of all over the place.
So that actually leads into the next question from Professor Al DeFries, who was asked, are the rising property values and increasing wealth in the area beneficial or detrimental to the vision of the project? You had mentioned that the early drawings showed a charm that was changing over time.
It's, it's been, so Alice Beach is fortunate in that it's been able to do very well over the years. We certainly had a period of time from 2008 to 2010 when things were very slow, and the recession certainly hit us like many other developers. Really, it was very tough. But now I think that we've hit kind of a point where there's enough built and enough people wanting to be here that the recent conditions have actually benefited Alice a lot. There's a lot more people wanting to kind of flee cities and come and stay in Alice, which is obviously a much quieter community, but hugely appealing. So I think we had probably 80 families that sheltered kind of in place during COVID, and sales absolutely exploded in the months of April, May, and June. And so the pressures then on owners and architects is that, there's an inevitable need for people who are seeing themselves living here more and more permanently to want to kind of push the envelope on program and increasing, the overall square footage that you can build, which in turn means increasing the towers and third floor terraces. And so it sometimes gets to be a little overly, I don't know what the word I want to use. Andres would tell me to use the word bombastic, but I don't want to use that. It becomes a little too exuberant. And so we have to constantly be trying to tell architects, hey, just try to scale back a little. We try to do that when we can in our own work. And that you do it for the good of the community, and that it's that owners have a lot of leeway to kind of deploy some of the more personal architectural elements that are really important to them in the privacy of their courtyards or their zaguans, but it doesn't necessarily have to be in the front of the home.
Professor David Marnick commented that the roofs in Bermuda are the shape and color they are to collect rainwater, and he wants to know if the roofs at Alice Beach also collect rainwater.
They actually do not collect rainwater. It was strictly an aesthetic decision. It's a clean roof line, but it does not collect water. There are certainly some owners who have chosen to do little cisterns, and they have urns that do collect water that they may try to recycle for different uses in their homes. But the roofs here in Alice don't do that.
The next is just a comment from Al DeFries, rather than a question, but he was just commenting on the intriguing water processing for irrigation and noting that iron staining is a plague on white buildings. So he congratulates.
Yeah, and that's why, and he's right, and that's why the idea to aerate the water in Lake Maryland to allow the iron to settle was done so that the clearer water could rise, and that would then be used for common irrigation.
The last question we have from a student is that given climate change, how do you approach the sort of rising sea levels and high winds?
So that's a good question. So we're kind of lucky and blessed that Alice Beach is about 32 feet above the water. So we don't really have to worry about rising water, but we certainly do have to worry about wind. And the decision early on to be able to design to the fortified standards, you know, I think at Alice, it's approached from a standpoint of kind of the most sustainable thing you can do is to build an architecture that's going to be enduring, that's not going to have the constant cycle of repainting and replacing. And so while we all recognize that it's one, luxury, and two, it is definitely more expensive to build in this way, it feels like it's the responsible thing to do when you see the extraordinary damage that can happen when you're not building to really strong standards. So, you know, the doors and the windows are all impact rated 20 miles above and beyond what the Florida Building Code mandates. Every block cell is filled with concrete, reinforced more than you need to per code, and so we're building little mini fortresses. So at the very least, even for people who have second and possibly third homes here, they can have peace of mind if there is going to be a hurricane. They don't have to rush back and board everything up. Certainly if we were to get a direct hit from a 4 or 5, it wouldn't be pretty. The houses would, I think, do just fine. We'd have a lot of landscape that would get, and miscellaneous elements that would suffer for sure, but it's mostly what would happen to the surrounding neighborhoods that would be kind of catastrophic. But Alice would, I think, do very well.
We do get one more question come in, and then I think we'll be able to end right on time, which is almost unheard of. Is your firm solely dedicated to your work within Alice?
No, it was from 2003 to 2015. We were strictly only working with the developer and on projects that they gave us to do. We then kind of relaunched KVA in 2016. Really grateful to the developer who asked us to continue on as the role of town architect. So we still are involved in that capacity, but we now take on projects outside of Alice, not only Alice, although certainly Alice remains one of our favorite places to work.
The only other thing that came through is Al DeFries, again, had wanted to use some of the images in your lecture for a building tech presentation about natural ventilation, but we'll connect you via email with him.
No problem. No problem at all.
And that's it for us. Stefanos, did you have anything, any final questions?
I just want to thank Marieanne for a comfortable and delightful lecture, as just to connect to my words beginning the presentation. Your work is extraordinary. We thank you very much for spending this time with us today, and we wish you best of luck going forward.
Thank you, Stefanos, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary Beth, for your help.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone, for attending.